Okay, let's get real with the solution. I have deleted the two roles that we created in our last session. And let's go ahead and create a new role, read shopping cart. And let's look at this policy. In this policy, what I've done is basically used a session tag in my conditional constraint. In the previous roles, we used specific tenant IDs like foo and bar. So we had to create one IAM role per tenant, which is not sustainable in the long run. Tenants come and go, and you don't want to be managing IAM roles for each tenant. So with this solution, we're just going to create one IAM role that is going to cover pretty much all the tenants that are going to be using that role. And the way we are going to do this is by using the session tags. So here I'm using the principal tag, tenant ID. Okay, now let's see how to use this particular role. So I'm going to create a Cloud Shell session, just like we did last time around. And what we're going to do is we are not only going to assume the role, but we are also going to pass in the session tag with the value of the tenant ID. So your command will look something like this, where we are going to assume the role. You are going to assume the shopping cart role. We are going to give it a session name. Since this is going to be for the foo tenant, I'm going to use a session name that has foo. And then here is the magic. We are going to pass in the session tags with the key of tenant ID, which matches this IAM role. And we are going to pass the value foo, which is the actual tenant ID. Okay. So now we have a credential which has the specific session tag that we need. Okay. So now we are not only going to create a session, but we are also going to store this in my current session. So now when I do get caller identity, you will see that I'm using the shopping cart foo session. Okay, so now let's go ahead and issue the DynamoDB query to go and fetch the data for foo. Here you go. I can see the data for the foo tenant. Now let's try and query the bar data. And we should get an access denied exception. There you go. This is what I would expect. Since our session is for the foo session, the IAM role is basically kicking out any queries for the bar tenant. So let's do the same thing, but let's create a new session for bar tenant this time around and then see what happens. Okay, so there you go. Now I've created a session for the bar. And now when I query the data for bar, I should see one row coming back from DynamoDB. There you go. And now if we run the query for foo, it should fail with an access denied exception. There you go. Okay, so now we have accomplished what we have set out to do. We have simplified the security policies. We don't have to create an IAM role per tenant. We have simplified it and we have unified it into one role. And we are using the session tags to differentiate between the different tenants who are going to use this role. I'll see you around in the next blog.